Today we are going to talk about Vaporeon and how to farm Slowpoke tails. Welcome back to another Pokemon Sleep video, it's Bro Vinny here. So once again, we're returning to one of the most contended topics in Pokemon Sleep, which evolution to go for. So I've already talked about this in the past in another video. So while it's not the topic today, I will mention that one of the first evolutions you should consider is Glaceon, because it will help you prepare for Snowdrop Tundra, which is one of the hardest areas currently available to raise their Snorlax. But the meta is shifting, and that is because as players are unlocking more and more rare ingredients like Slowpoke tails, or mushrooms, or potatoes, or leeks, you now have to find a way to farm these ingredients. And while there's generally decent options for each ingredient, each of the rare ingredient, for example, the Victory Bell, Golem, or Mr. Mime evolutionary lines, they do potatoes, and Ductrio will do leeks, and Gengar will do mushrooms. The problem is Slowpoke tail. And the problem is there are no ingredient specialists right now that makes Slowpoke tails. Slowking line does not count because that's a skill specialist. It simply has Slowpoke tail at level 30. Ditto also doesn't count because, well, level 60 hasn't even been unlocked yet. And it's so far away, so when are you ever going to get that Slowpoke tail? With Ditto also being a hard candy to farm, level 60 is going to be quite far away for a lot of people. So let's talk about the problems of these two Pokemon. And the first problem is the ingredient rate. And we've talked about this multiple times before, but not in this context. So we're going to use Rainonex's calculator, and we're going to go to their Pokedex. So we're going to go over here to the Pokedex, and then we're going to select 4. So we're going to scroll down on this filter option, and we're going to select for ingredient rate. And then we're also going to sort them by ingredient rate, so from top to bottom. So this is how you use this calculator to see what I'm seeing. You can see that certain ingredient specialists like Geodude, they have a high rate of dropping ingredients. Some Slarking is a special one. It also has a high ingredient rate, even though it's a berry specialist. And then so on. You can see a lot of ingredient specialists are up here for their ingredient rate. But the problem with Slowpoke, which is the only currently available Slowpoke tail farming Pokemon, is that they only have a 15% of ingredient rate. On top of that, they are slow. So when I say slow, we come back to the top here and we sort the Pokemon by their speed. So let's say we go for frequency, the base frequency, and then we're going to sort them by base frequency. And again, we're going to scroll, and you'll see that if we ignore all the unevolved Pokemon, so actually what we also need to do is come back up here and filter out the non-evolved Pokemon. So just click Final Evolution, because that's a more fair comparison. You'll quickly see that Slowbro is right at the bottom of the list, right next to Slarking and Sudowoodo. Slowking isn't much better, but it is preferred for you to have Slowking rather than Slowbro where you can. So it's slow, and every time it drops, it only has a 15% chance of dropping an ingredient. But as you should know by now, the base ingredient is actually cacao, and there's a chance that you might get a Slowpoke tail at its level 30 unlock. If you don't have Slowpoke tail at level 30, you just simply don't even have a Slowpoke tail farmer. But that means there's a 50-50 chance you're actually going to get a cacao rather than a Slowpoke tail, cutting that ingredient rate to 7.5%. It's not even 15%. The only other good thing about this Slowking line is that it can do some healing for your team via its main skill. So while it does kind of suck to farm Slowpoke tail, don't forget there are other benefits as well. How about Ditto? Let's take a look at Ditto. So Ditto has a 20% chance of ingredient drop, and it also has a relatively low speed. It's not much better than Slowbro, but it's even worse than Slowking. Although you might argue that Ditto can drop 3 Slowpoke tails, given that it is an ingredient specialist, it might even be better than Slowbro or Slowking, but I'm going to have to disagree with you because Let's say level 60 has been unlocked and you're lucky enough to get a Slowpoke Tail ingredient for its level 60 unlock. The problem is, there's also a chance to drop oil or leak. So let's say you have these 3 ingredients unlocked, which is my preferred Ditto. The problem is, well, even if it triggers an ingredient, it only has a 1 in 3 chance of getting a Slowpoke Tail drop. Yes, it will get 3 times, but it will take 3 triggers on average to get that Slowpoke Tail, which then averages out to be about 1 tail per trigger of the ingredient. So if we apply the same logic here, let's say these are your 3 ingredients for your Slowking. There's a 1 in 3 chance you get Cacao, 1 in 3 chance you get 1 Slowpoke Tail, and 1 in 3 chance you'll get 2 Slowpoke Tails, which again averages out to be 1 Slowpoke Tail per trigger. But of course, the advantage of Ditto is it can also get leaks, which are a rare ingredient as well. But then, Ditto doesn't do any healing, so there are still pros and cons of each Pokemon. So here lies the problem. There is no consistent, reliable way to get Slowpoke Tails via ingredient farming, so players are looking elsewhere. The good news is there are 2 other ways you can get Slowpoke Tail. You might already know this, but you can actually get it from ingredient ticket S or ingredient ticket M. As long as you've already farmed it once. So under your notes section, you must have this Slowpoke Tail here displayed. So in my case, I will never get potatoes because I still haven't unlocked potatoes from ingredient ticket or ingredient magnet. The bad news is there are a total of 15 different ingredients that ingredient magnet or ingredient ticket can produce. So while ingredient magnet S can produce 10 ingredients, there are only 2 types of ingredients it will pick each time, giving you 5 of each. And for ingredient magnet S, it will pick 3 types of ingredients, giving you 10 of each. Now, because the ingredient magnet S will only pick 2 of the ingredients out of the 15, it will on average take you about 7.5 tickets in order to get 1 proc of Slowpoke Tails. Yes, you get 5 Slowpoke Tails when it does happen, but that's not even enough for a dish. Most dishes, in fact the only 2-tailed dishes, require 8 and 10 tails each. So you're going to need to run at least 15 ingredient ticket S in order to be expected to be able to cook 1-tailed dish. And you can do similar maths with ingredient ticket M, but basically you'll need to on average run 5 ingredient magnet M's to be reliably getting 10 tails in order to cook 1 dish. So needless to say, this is not a reliable method to get Slowpoke Tails. Ingredient tickets are mainly good if you have a variety of dishes you can cook rather than hunting for a single ingredient. What will usually end up happening is that you'll fill your bag with all the ingredients you don't need before you get the one that you do. So that leads us down the rabbit hole of finding Vaporeon. And why that is because Vaporeon is an ingredient magnet S Pokemon, but it's also a skills specialist. So in most situations, it's going to be better at triggering this skill than, say, your Charizard or Blastoise, Venusaur, and Walrein, and so on. In fact, it has the highest skill trigger value than all other ingredient magnet Pokemon. So let's go and take a look at that at the RainNX calculator. So there are 2 ways you can find the skill trigger value. You can go to Team, skill trigger analysis. By the way, I'll leave a link to this calculator in the description below. And then you just click the Pokemon that you want to compare to. So I know that Onix has ingredient magnet S, but it's not a skill specialist. Regardless, it will compare to any of the Pokemon that has ingredient magnet S. So every Pokemon that's listed in the second window down here are ingredient magnet Pokemon. So then you compare it to, let's say we pick Onix again, you will find that it will give a relative skill value of 1.0 because we're comparing Onix to Onix. So if we compare it to Vaporeon, however, it is going to trigger 2.5 times or 2.7 times more than an Onix in ingredient magnet. But of course, Onix is a berry specialist. It is not a skill specialist. And you can click multiple of these just to compare. And then also you can sort them by the highest value to the lowest value. So let's say I want to see these Pokemon in order of the highest skill trigger rate, you can see that Vaporeon rises to the top. But let's say you don't want to have to click everything yourself. Again, you can go to Pokedex and click this filter option here. And again, scroll down here and click skill trigger value. And then sort them by skill trigger value. So from highest to lowest. Now, unlike other filters, this one will automatically pick a skill for you first, because you can't compare skill trigger values across different main skills. So if you click Charge Strength S, you're going to only see Pokemon with Charge Strength S. So you're going to have to select Ingredient Magnet S here just to see the relative value of all of the Ingredient Magnet S Pokemon. And you can see that Vaporeon rises to the top, with the second being Slacking, followed by Heracross. Slacking is a berry specialist by name, but when it evolves from Vigoroth, yes, it reduces in speed, but it suddenly gains a huge boost to its skill trigger value. So then it becomes the only dual specialist in this game that is both skill and berry. We use that term dual specialist loosely. So if you look at Slacking, now this video is not about Slacking, but if we have a look at Slacking, you can see that Vigoroth and Slakoth have very low Ingredient Magnet S trigger. In fact, one of the lowest. But once it evolves, it becomes almost as good as Vaporeon. But it should be noted that Slacking is a slow Pokemon with a base frequency of over an hour. But just for a fair comparison, let's go to the filters again, and we only want to compare skill specialists so that Vaporeon has fair competition, and also final evolution only. That leaves only Heracross and Vaporeon. Heracross being a bit worse. It's also quite hard to get Heracross candy since it's a relatively rare Pokemon, whereas it's very, very easy to get Eevee candies. And the berry strength you get from Heracross is one of the lowest. I think Bugberry might be the lowest, right alongside flying type berries. The main advantage here is that you could potentially get mushrooms, whereas Vaporeon cannot farm any rare ingredients in its ingredient list. But it doesn't matter because we're relying on Ingredient Magnet S for these skill specialists. So with the highest skill trigger value, most people have found that this Vaporeon can trigger anywhere between 2 to 5 times a day in terms of main skill. But before you go jumping in and investing in a Vaporeon, there are many different pros and cons you need to consider first. And it's not a simple yes, you should use it or no, you shouldn't use it answer. The first problem of Vaporeon is that Oran Berries, well, there are a lot of water type Pokemon in this game. And it's mainly used for Cyan Beach, which is an early game area. And its ingredient lists are generally common. So while you get a berry finding S, Vaporeon would be good to double the strength from its berry output. Even better if it's Cyan Beach, if you've already got enough water berry Pokemon like Totodile with berry finding S or Blastoise, etc. And you don't really need any rare ingredients for the week. For example, if it's desserts, well, Slowpoke tails are not used in desserts at all, then you may have no use for a Vaporeon. The second problem is that it is still RNG. There is a significant random chance involved here. Even if you have level 6 main skill, and you should try to get level 6 as much as possible if you are running an Ingredient Magnet specialist like this, each time the Ingredient Magnet triggers, you'll get 3 ingredients, but 7 of each, so you get 21 if it's at level 6. At lower levels, you will either get 2 of each, or you might get 2, 3, and 3, etc. So the numbers aren't always exactly divisible by 3. But on average, you are going to need to trigger 5 times of this Ingredient Magnet S in order to get 1 lot of Slowpoke tails, so 1 lot of 7. And that's because there are, again, 15 different types of ingredients you can drop. And if you can get 3 each time, then you get 15 divided by 3. And on average, you're going to have to trigger 5 times. Of course, this is still probability. It doesn't mean that if you trigger 5 times, you'll definitely get Slowpoke tail. You're not guaranteed that. But the good news is there are 4 different rare ingredients. So as long as you don't mind farming a lot of different types of ingredients, similar to ingredient ticket S, then the calculations significantly improve. You just have to learn how to make all the different dishes using the rare ingredients. And once again, you can see that desserts does not use a leek or tails, whereas mushrooms and potatoes are used across all of the dishes. But of course, for the free-to-play, this might be a bit difficult. To even get close to numbers like these, you first need level 6 main skill. So unless you've got all the main skill seeds in the world, you're going to need something like skill level up. But of course, if you have skill level up, well, that might take away a slot for skill trigger and helping speed, which is some other skills you'll need for your Vaporeon. But without those skill level up sub skills, your Vaporeon will only at most reach level 2, which kind of sucks. So you're going to need 4 main skill seeds to get it to level 6. And for a free to play, that's going to be very difficult. And while generally speaking, skill trigger is better than skill level up, if you're completely free to play and you're never going to make it to skill level 6, then skill level up is actually more important. Because look at this, it's simple maths. If you get skill level up M, you get almost double the ingredients drop. On the other hand, skill trigger S only increases your skill trigger rate by 18% or skill trigger M by 36%. And that is not as strong as doubling the ingredients drop. So like I always say, this is a good free-to-play skill for skill specialists. And then the other problem in comparisons to Slowpoke Line is that Vaporeon doesn't do any healing. So you might need to use a slot for a healer like a Wigglytuff or a Sylveon. Whereas running Slowpoke Line, look, we could potentially get away with not running an energy for everyone healer. And the last problem of running Vaporeon is that you need to log in often. If you only log in 3 times a day, even if your Vaporeon triggers the most every day, then at most you can only get this ingredient magnet, well, 3 times a day. So if your playstyle is not to log in to the app too frequently, well, this might not be the option for you. Whereas if you log into the game 6 or 8 times a day just to collect ingredients and, do some other stuff, well, you might be able to trigger this main skill more often. On the other hand, Ditto and Slowpoke Lines, as long as you have enough inventory, you'll be able to avoid logging into the game excessively. And as a side note, if you don't log into the game very much, then Berry Finding S is the way to go, because any Pokemon with Berry Finding S will automatically farm a lot more berries once it hits Sneaky Snacking. That is, when your inventory on your Pokemon are full. So in Vaporeon's case, this becomes ×2. Alright, so what are the advantages of running Vaporeon? We've talked a lot about the problems of running Vaporeon. Well, first of all, it is the highest skill trigger value, which we've already covered. But if we take a look at its speed as well, so we're going to sort everything by frequency, and we're going to only display final evolutions. So while Vaporeon is not extremely fast, in fact one of the slowest of the evolutions, it is still significantly faster than Slowking, Ditto, and Slowbro. And with more speed means more berry strength, but also more chance to skill trigger. The second good thing about Vaporeon is that if you have skill trigger and skill level up to make it skill level 6, to boost its already high skill trigger value, it's going to do you a lot of good. On the other hand, with Slowbro Line, if you put ingredient finder S&M on it, yes, that's desired because we want more Slowpoke tail drops, but to start with, it's only a 15% ingredient drop rate. Don't forget it's only half of that because half of it will be cacao, and you boost it by, let's say, an ingredient finder M, it only goes to about 20% ingredient finding rate. Basically, a small number being boosted remains to be a slightly small number. Whereas it makes a lot of sense to boost an already high skill trigger value with these skills. And while they are not comparable measures, we can't compare ingredient rate to skill trigger value. It just seems like common sense to put skill trigger on a skill specialist rather than putting ingredient finder on a skill specialist that is slowpoke line. And of course, slowpoke lines are also fighting for these skills because it's also a skill specialist in healing. How many skills are you going to be able to fit into one slowpoke? Because it also needs helping speed because it's a very slow Pokemon. And it can also use inventory. So in other words, a slowpoke kind of needs, well, everything. But you can only fit 5 skills in a Pokemon. So while it seems like it's almost never bad to have a slowpoke because as long as it doesn't land these skills, everything else could be useful, I believe you're going to get a bit more out of Vaporeon if you have these skills on the Vaporeon. And it doesn't hurt to have a little bit of inventory. But ingredient finder on Vaporeon, almost completely useless. So, the reason why Vaporeon is rising to fame compared to when we first started the game is now clear because we can get rare ingredients, especially if you have level 6 on that main skill, you're going to get a lot of these rare ingredients. So as long as you don't mind the randomness of this skill, you might get potatoes instead of, say, tails, then you might want to consider using Vaporeon as your ingredient farmer for slowpoke tails. But if it's really strong and it's got all sorts of skill trigger nature, and so on, it might even be enough to overtake an ingredient specialist slot on your team. But if you're unlucky enough to hit desserts week, maybe don't run Vaporeon and just go back to your main ingredient specialists. Alternatively, you could save up your tails and save up your leeks for another week. So this video is not a recommendation on using Vaporeon over something else that you might need. But if you've got a gap in your team and you're happy to farm any of the rare ingredients, then Vaporeon might be for you. Just remember to log into the game often, as is the case whenever you run a skill specialist. Thank you for watching, guys. Let me know what you think about Vaporeon in the comments section below. And I do have a tip for those of you who are not 100% sure about evolving, and it is to not evolve because Eevee can also provide Ingredient Magnet S. If you feel like Eevee is a good member for your team, then evolving to Vaporeon would make even more sense. If you feel like Eevee is not the way to go for your team building, then Vaporeon is not your choice. Don't forget to like and subscribe.